Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
Welcome back to another exciting week, Mike.
It is an exciting week. It is -4 outside today.
It's cold.
Yes, it's a cold one here in Madison, Wisconsin.
But you know where it's hot?
Hot.
Where it's going to be hot?
Where's it going to be hot?
It's going to be hot at the Frequency in Madison this weekend.
Oh, yeah. Hey, so this is some good news, everybody. We've got new music for you. We've got a new official release that we're doing Saturday, January 14th. If you are in Wisconsin, in Madison, come see us. Where can they come see us, Wendy?
They can come see us at the Frequency. And it's the Dartboard Records Showcase, which is a record label we're working with. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be several bands. It's going to be so much fun.
And these are songs that we developed right here on the podcast. So they're based on
all of the songs on this EP, in fact.
They're based on actual podcast episodes and songs that we wrote for them. We developed them, took them to a big studio, and they're there for your listening pleasure. So if you're in Wisconsin, we know a lot of people listening in Madison, come out and party with us at the Frequency on Saturday, January 14th. We'll be playing at 10:30 p.m.
Yes.
And if you're not in Madison, I know a lot of people are outside of town, you will be able to hear us and previews of the EP and stuff like that. Streaming, we'll have several podcast and live appearances on the internets.
Yes, this week is chock full of radio action.
They can find that at our Twitters. Where's our Twitters?
At Other Side Talk.
Yeah, you'll find that. We'll have that on there. Or the actual band is at Sunspot Music, and you can find it there. So just anyway, we're really excited about have a new EP coming out of songs that we developed here with you guys. And we can't wait for you to hear them because they're awesome.
Very, very, very exciting. Always fun launching some new recordings out into the world. So
yeah,
I'm pumped.
So that's been fun. You know what else, Wendy, has been fun is that we've been doing like little facts and little videos for each episode for maybe the past 3 months now, 4 months.
Factoids, if you will.
Like little factoid videos, little preview videos. And we've been putting them out on our Twitter too, but they're also at our YouTube channel.
Oh, that's right.
And I know
Where's that, Mike?
We're just sitting here throwing out social media stuff. You can find that sunspotmusic.com/YouTube.
Yeah.
Is where you would go to find that.
And as long as we're on the social media.
Yeah, we might as well.
Pimping and promoting. We might as well invite everybody to join us on Instagram as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the user Other Side Podcast.
And so make sure you find us there. So anyway, so there's a lot of fun ways. We have a lot of cool stuff that's coming out in 2017. And we want you guys to, if you enjoy everything, to be able to check out some of that. The fun things we're doing. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and we love interacting with people who listen to the show. So, that's the best way you can do it is on the socials.
Yes. So go on the social media. And number one, I want to hear from everybody after they listen to this podcast, what their favorite story about Bigfoot is.
Ooh.
Because this is our first Bigfoot-centric podcast.
True. Now, we've had a couple of cryptid podcasts.
Yes, we've definitely...
the Round Table.
We've talked about Bigfoot. We've talked about him several times. We never had a Bigfoot-centered episode. So this is about the man himself.
One episode all for Bigfoot.
All for these big feet. So if you have a favorite Bigfoot, Sasquatch, skunk ape, Yeti, abominable snowman story, tell us on any of our socials. Other Side Podcast, Instagram, Other Side Talk, Twitter, sunspotmusic.com/YouTube. You can take a video of yourself telling your favorite story. And we will put that and we will repost that for everybody.
Now, I haven't personally had any Bigfoot experiences, but
you haven't seen the Bigfoot?
I've heard with talking to such experts that this area, some of the wooded areas in Wisconsin might be prime Bigfoot lurking zones. Mm-hmm. So whenever I go running through there, I'm always kind of looking for little clues, footprints, or.
Well, my first Bigfoot experience was Harry and Anderson's. And that's when
that does not count as a Bigfoot experience.
That's
Mike.
when I saw Bigfoot for the first time. That wasn't real? Okay. I'm sorry. John Lithgow is just such a good actor. But,
it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous because Bigfoot lives with them. And they made a TV show too. Harry and Henderson's TV show. They had when they ever make a spin-off TV show, they don't have any of the actual actors. They just bring in the TV names to do it.
Right.
But I was a faithful watcher of the Harry and Henderson's TV show as well. And they brought out Harry less.
Well, you are basically a Bigfoot expert then, I guess.
Pretty much.
Right?
I've had several Bigfoot experiences, and they've all been in front of a screen. No, but I mean, I've met people that actually have, had Bigfoot experiences. And our interview today is with a professor from Eastern Illinois University, journalism professor, who wrote a book called Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. Joe Gisondi is his name. And he gets in and he interviews, dozens of people that have had these Bigfoot experiences. And what makes his book cool is it's not just about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the skunk ape. It's not just about that. It's really about the people who are searching for it.
Cool.
And so
that's got to be super interesting.
Well, because you're getting past, why, is Bigfoot real? Okay. Does it matter? What matters is that, thousands of people spend hundreds of hours of their lives in the forest. I mean, even our friend Jay Pachochin.
Yeah.
Right? Like Jay's always like, who wants to go hunting for Bigfoot? Like he's always out there looking for Bigfoot.
Totally. And at the paranormal conventions that we've attended, I've talked to several Bigfoot enthusiasts, and it's just fascinating to me because they're as passionate about it as any other topic I can think of. It's, and it's to be so passionate about something that is so unique.
Right. Yeah. And really that's what this book is about. And then Joe gets into that in the interview, and he talks about all the fun he had on the different expeditions that he got to go on and the cool people he gets to meet, including like the people who now have that TV show Finding Bigfoot and stuff like that. Yeah. So he really got to go in depth, not just looking for the big man himself, but it's a study of the people who are searching for the big feet. So let's talk to Joe. Okay, we're joined today by a professor and author, Joe Gisondi, who wrote a book called Monster Trek, The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. And Joe is joining us just down the road in Illinois. How you doing today, Joe?
Great. How you doing today?
Fantastic. Well, I'm in a good mood, even though it's -4 degrees in Madison today. How is it down there?
It was 3 this morning, so I guess we're balmy down here compared to you guys.
I was going to say I could go in shorts in Illinois today. So exactly what city is Eastern Illinois University at?
We're in Charleston, Illinois, which is about 2.5, 3 hours south of Chicago.
Okay. Closer to like the Indiana area, or closer to like the Missouri area, or which direction?
We seem to be in the middle, sort of nowhere, but equally close to everything. We're 2 hours. I can get to downtown St. Louis in 2 hours. I can get to Indianapolis downtown in 2 hours. So Champaign is about 45 minutes northwest where University of Illinois is.
Okay.
So I'm Terre Haute in Indiana. I can get there in 30 minutes or so.
All right. So I just wanted to give a little idea of your geography there. So you're smack dab in the middle of our nation.
That's right.
So Joe, first of all, how does someone who works at a college get to also be able to talk about Bigfoot?
Well, I'm a journalist by experience, and I teach journalism here at Eastern Illinois University. So I decided I wanted to work on this project here. I've always been interested in it. I've always been very much enamored by paranormal, even though I don't think Bigfoot is paranormal. And I think people who search for Bigfoot, I sometimes get upset when you refer to it as paranormal. But I have been interested in, when I was growing up, my mom used to get the National Enquirer when it wasn't doing the TMZ stuff. It was doing more of the ghosts and aliens and Bigfoot stuff. And we would read, I grew up in New Jersey, so we would read the New York Times, the Daily News, and the National Enquirer, and that was the one that would make it pretty cool.
All right. So you had this interest when you were a kid, and that's great. Like, the thing is, like, what's the point of the National Enquirer? If even the National Enquirer, if it helped you foster an interest in this kind of thing, to me, that makes the whole existence of the newspaper worth it.
Oh man, I would trade that for anything. That was just an amazing back then. It was so cool. As a matter of fact, when I went to college, I spent 20 years in Florida. When I went to college, my teacher of journalism would write articles for them, and this was something he'd do under a pseudonym. And he said they paid, first of all, very well. Secondarily, he goes, 80% of the stuff in there was really true. And if you look at it, it really is. It's just that they needed that 10 or 20% sometimes that were untrue. Not that the thing that the paranormal are untrue, but I mean, they would make stuff up with celebrities and, all that other kinds of stuff, or exaggerate, I guess.
Oh, that's right. And you have to have some kind of, crazy headline like the most famous, the Bat Boy, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is the one that people always talk about, the Bat Boy article. But so that's interesting. So, that's your two passions right there. There's a little bit of paranormal and there's a little bit of journalism, sensational as it may be.
Right. Exactly.
So, what brought you to this particular subject to write the book? Number one, why Bigfoot? And number two, what brought you to be like, you know what? Because when you're going to write a book, it's going to be a year of your life at least. And looking here, it says 6 years of research. So you're spending a good chunk of your life in pursuit of the Sasquatch. What led you to this particular subject?
Well, it was, it's kind of selfish. I like the hiking camp, and I've camped. When I was in Florida, we did an awful lot of camping down south in North Carolina and Georgia, and of course all over Florida. And nowadays, when I'm up here, I camp all over the country. And so I thought it was a great opportunity to visit the country, first of all. Second of all, who doesn't love an adventure? Who doesn't like, you're going out in the middle of the woods and you're looking for literally what some people perceive to be a monster? Who doesn't like that? Except for the people who would catch a monster and don't want to really catch it, grabbing a monster by the tail.
Right.
I still remember every time they show that Patterson Gimlin film, I guess, and of Patty there in, 1967 in Northern California. There was a movie that was making the rounds when I was born in 63, so this must have been, 72, 73, 74. It was called The Wild. It was a movie about this guy who raised and protected wolves. But at the end of that was this, I forget if it was 10 minutes, 30 minutes short, that talked about Bigfoot. It was in the movie theaters when they had two of them. And I remember seeing that. And I remember having the Patty creature looking back in the film on that big screen. And that sort of was burned into my brain at that moment, going, oh, my God, something like this might exist out there in the woods somewhere. And I was always intrigued. I'd go to the library and look up stuff in microfiche all through my life. Even grad school, when I'd have time, I'd be enamored by stories about this. So I very much wanted to be involved with this and learn more about what is. But more importantly, I was really more amazed and interested in why people search for Bigfoot. We don't have any scientific evidence that Bigfoot exists, but yet people are out there looking for it. And a lot of these people don't have really any scientific experience or training at all, but yet they have a passion. And I wanted to know what their passion is. I tell my students, if you want to write a story, find somebody who's very passionate about something and do a story on them. And that's what I sought to do with this book.
Just for real quick, for anybody out there who doesn't know exactly what we're talking about, the Patterson film. The Patterson film is kind of the famous, like, when I think of like the Bigfoot silhouette, or they even sell cutouts now. And I've seen these all up north Wisconsin, that people will sneak these cutouts like at the side of the road. I don't know if you've seen those, but it'll be that silhouette, and we'll put a link in the show notes. So if you guys know what you're talking about, but when you think of Bigfoot, think of Bigfoot captured on film. That is what you're seeing in your head. You're seeing the Patterson film from the late '60s that made the rounds, and that was shot in Northern California.
Yes, it was. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity I was up in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and I was trying to convince my wife to go up into the woods there and to try to find that area. Although it's very impossible, pretty much, for someone like me to just go find this place. But
right, water in.
Yeah, right. And my wife was a biologist in Florida for 10 years. She's now a nurse up here in Illinois. But she thinks this is all kinds of ridiculousness and didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I would love to go to the Pacific Northwest there and go out with some people there, because I think that film, I'm always torn. I guess we can talk about this more about whether or not Bigfoot exists, but I think that's the most compelling evidence that a Bigfoot does exist.
That particular film, like, that's the best evidence.
I think so, and I'm not an expert. I mean, I've talked to people who know far better than me, like Cliff Barackman and Dr. Jeff Meldrum and other non-Bigfoot seeking scientists, and it's tough to debunk that. It's tough to debunk that.
Well, why don't we start with so you decided you're like, okay, this is going to be two great tastes that taste great together. People's obsession, people's passion for finding Bigfoot, and it goes into your journalism. It goes into your interest in, stories that are a little beyond the mainstream. And so you're getting into this. Now, when you're going to write a book about this, what's your first step? Like, what do you start with? Who do you call? Like, if I, like now being involved in this kind of world, like I'd know who to call for a Bigfoot hunter. But when you were starting this out, were you like, okay, look up, starting the bees and the yellow pages, or where'd you go?
Well, really what I did is I did two things. Number one, you type in Bigfoot and a couple of things popped up. When I started this project in 2009, a little bit, and I would do a little bit each year, you would have the BFRO would jump out, the Bigfoot Research Organization. So if you're looking for a place that has a lot of information, you go to BFRO. I think it's .net. So I look there, and that's one site, and that's the one that's run by Matt Moneymaker, who's on Finding Bigfoot.
Okay, right.
As a matter of fact, I remember Matt and I talked, and I forget what year it was. It was like the first year or two I was working on this out in Oklahoma, and we were chatting, and he was telling about trying to pitch the show to different networks, and so I'm glad to see that he was able to get that done.
Yeah, it certainly worked.
Oh, absolutely. And the other thing, other person that I reached out to and who contacted me within the hour was Tom Biscardi. And I'm sure you know his name a little bit there, that he is, a P.T. Barnum of sorts, in the sense that I don't know how to say this any better, but it seems like he's done several hoaxes involving Bigfoot, including the most prominent one of the Georgia boys. As a matter of fact, I was supposed to go out in the woods with him that weekend, and he that whole Georgia boy thing, it went crazy. We were supposed to go out in Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, and both he and I ended up having different things that were supposed to go on. But he contacted me. I can see why people like him and trust him and do all those different things, because he's very personable on the phone. He seems to be, a really nice guy, and all these other things. And of course, the fatal flaw is if he's making these things up. That's there's nothing worse than that.
I mean, see, he comports himself as a professional then, right? Like he knows how to talk. He seems like a reasonable person. And
he could sell anything. Yeah, he could sell used cars. I mean, he could sell anything. Yeah, you're right.
And then something comes out, and he's like, "Okay, guys, I got a corpse of Bigfoot. It's got DNA evidence. They have a press conference, and it's obviously ridiculous. A rubber costume or something like that. So. And if you guys look up Tom Biscardi, you'll see that he's, a cryptozoology enthusiast. Even his, Wikipedia, Las Vegas promoter, internet radio host, film producer, describes himself as the real Bigfoot hunter. And so, of course, he's like, somebody's going to be writing a book on Bigfoot. He's going to want to contact you because, there's an opportunity right there.
Right. Exactly. Eventually, though, I ended up going out with the BFRO in a expedition in Oklahoma, not far from where the story involving the Falk County monster on the Arkansas border took place. We were in the Ouachita Mountains, which is in eastern Oklahoma, and I spent some time with him as my first person. Matt and I spent that first night. It was he and I were alone in one of the areas where they're doing an expedition. I know a lot of people also say a lot of negative things about Matt Moneymaker within the circles of Bigfoot investigators, enthusiasts, whatever term you want to use. In my face-to-face interactions with him, I found him nothing but generous and kind, and all the others. I went on 2 expeditions with him, one with his group, not with him per se, and another one in North Carolina. And so those are the first 2. I was trying to figure out, is there a book here? What's going on? And after those 2, I decided that there were. So I started reaching out to other people. At the same time, I was thinking, well, do I want to meet some people in Missouri? And at that point, they realized I had never signed a non-disclosure agreement about anything. And they were, because they had these forms, and I never mailed one in because as a journalist, I can't be beholden to anybody. Right. At least that's what real journalists do. I mean, we see mistakes and problems out there among some others. But so they got really angry, and they tried coming at me a little bit. And I told them, listen, I'm not here to rip into you or anybody else. I'm just here to, report what I'm seeing.
And so real quick, so you guys went out the Arkansas border part of Oklahoma, and it's funny because I just saw The Legend of Boggy Creek for the first time this summer.
Yeah, exactly. It was probably about 2 hours away tops. It was as you're going through the mountains and everything. Yeah.
And so finally, my sister brought it to hang out. She's like, guys, I got The Legend of Boggy Creek. And I'm like, all of a sudden it's, 1972 again. And so we're watching it. And it's interesting. So now, which organization? It was the BFRO, or was it Matt's organization that you went out with when you guys went out there?
Well, that is Matt's organization.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Which is different than we were talking earlier about Thomas Gardy.
Right.
So yeah, I went out with them, and then I went out with down in the central North Carolina area. And Michael Green is someone who said that he has some video of a Bigfoot grabbing some food. I forget if at that point it was a Zagnut bar or something like that.
Now I'm hungry.
No, exactly. Or I feel like, watching, what was it? The movie where he says Zagnut 3 times. Anyway, yeah, say it once, say it twice, say it 3 times. I can't remember it. Really anyway, that's where that video was. I was within, 20 yards of that because Michael Green, who is a former investigator in New Jersey, is a really wonderful guy. Has some interesting video, and there's a lot of interesting video out there in these places, but nothing conclusive there.
No, and you go out on an expedition. Okay, so you'd been somebody who's been to camping, you're into hiking, you like the outdoors. You're probably an REI member, kind of thing. So you have that. The outdoors kind of lifestyle, and you're enjoying it. You go in Florida, parks and things like that. So when you go out for your first Bigfoot hunting expedition, now what was your perception? What did you think was going to happen, and what actually happened?
I don't think you could really prepare for it. I just thought it was pretty wild that after the first time I had such an adrenaline rush because I'm out there and I just thought, wow, this is just so cool. And I just enjoyed it, trying, making sure I keep my distance. I wrote the book actually in first person. So I share what I was feeling and thinking at these times as well and what was going on. But ultimately I thought, we've got a bunch of people running through the woods, 30, 40 people sometimes. If someone lives in the woods, how are we going to sneak up on anything? That was the one thing. On the other hand, there was a couple of situations in some of these treks through the woods that I went, wow, was that what I think it was or was it not? As a matter of fact, within my first hour out in the woods, I'm looking through one of these FLIRs, the night vision, and I was able to I looked in the woods, and Matt said, hey, I'm going to have a smoke break here and see what you can see. And he hands me this $10,000 or whatever it is, FLIR. I'm going, well, I better not drop it. And I look in the woods and I see what I believe to be a Bigfoot creature kneeling, looking down, looking at me.
Okay, so let's dial this back for a second. So so you didn't have a previous Bigfoot sighting before you ever went on one of these adventures?
No, I've had a couple of situations that people tell me in retrospect they very much could have been something that was out there and everything, but of course that's conjecture. So no, not that I know of.
So you're here now. Exactly where are you? Like, what state are you in? What time of night is this?
This is in the Wichita Mountains, and where they have the Bigfoot Festival, right near there, near not far from the border of Arkansas, and it's probably about 10, 11 at night. And
what month it is? So let's think about how much light is there right now, or anything like. So what time of the year?
I think it was first week in October. So it was chilly, but not, well, that's balmy by Wisconsin
right,
standard.
I was going to say, it's not really cold.
No, I'd say, I don't know, lower 40s, mid 40s, something like that night. And we're walking in the woods, and actually we parked, and then, in that area, it's a lot of Native Americans own a lot of different land, and they have a lot of dogs. And so we're out sitting there, and we're hearing other people do some calls far, far in the distance. So there's a tree line there in the open area.
When you say by calls, like I think of like Duck Dynasty guys or something. So what kind of calls are you hearing in the distance?
From other people who are making calls that are within the organization. If anybody who's ever watched Finding Bigfoot will know. I mean, all of them, Bobo and Cliff and Matt certainly, and do the calls out there in the woods. It's almost inexplicable how to explain those, because I've heard some really bizarre things in the wild that I really can't explain. There was one in Florida that was probably the most bizarre thing that ever happened to me, maybe almost in my life. And
Let's get to that one in one sec. We're gonna go for Bigfoot, and then let's go back to Florida because bizarre is exactly what we're looking for. So let's start
Sure.
with. So you hear some. So these guys are making the Bigfoot calls. How many people are out with you that night? Is this the 30 to 40 people?
I'm thinking there's probably at least low mid-20s at least for this one.
So it's a good sized group.
Yeah, there was far more people in North Carolina. I think one reason is the week before there was an expedition at the Boggy Creek sort of area there, and so they didn't have as many people. So yeah, let's say 20, 22, something like that. And so I looked at it, and I didn't want to be that crazy guy who the moment you give him a FLIR or a camera, going, "Hey, I see Bigfoot." So I kept looking, going, "Is this something that I'm really seeing or not?" So I made sure I had a keen eye of the area, and I said, "Hey," as calmly as I could, I said, "Hey, Matt, I'm not sure if I see something here." I just slowly said that, and he goes, "You're really seeing something?" And I handed it to him. He looked in the same area, and he didn't see a thing. He gives it to me. I look in the area, and I don't see anything. So it was either there was something there looking at me, and it was beginner's luck, or it was like looking at a cloud, and they change formations all the time, and who knows what you see.
Well, what kind of? So it's like a infrared type of. So what exactly did you look through? Like what kind of glasses? Did it look like the Predator or something like that when he looks at things?
No, it's sort of the heat. When these night vision pick up of a lot of the heat signatures. So sometimes a tree could look like a leg, I guess, if it's been getting enough sun and the right thing in the right time period. So I saw what appeared to be not a silhouette. It was more than just. When you see these, and I know you deal with this a lot more than I do, when you see things about ghosts, and or at least the classic one, you just see this amorphous figure. This one seemed pretty defined. I could make out eyes. I could make out a head. I could. It was almost like it was kneeling down on its side, and with his hand on its right leg, his head tilted to the left, and his hand resting in his hand, looking straight at me.
And was there any other landmarks around it for kind of size, so you could reference like a tree or a shrub or something like that, where you could be like, "Oh my God, this thing's 9 foot tall," or something like that?
When I was looking at it, it appeared to me that it was much bigger than I am. I'm about 5'11", a little over 5'11", and I could tell it was bigger than I am, but I didn't make any marks like go out there and try to size everything. It was very clear to me. It was larger than me. It was anywhere probably from 7 or at least 7 feet or taller, and it was certainly bulky. It almost looked like I had taken the creature out of the Patty film in 1967 and had deposited it there and looked at me. And so that's what I was looking at and I looked at it for a good minute or two, and those who search for Bigfoot believe that they can stand perfectly still for long periods of time. And that's one of the ways they're able to elude people. That's one of the beliefs, at least.
And how long were you guys into your expedition? So was this like a couple of days you were out, or was this like a one night kind of thing? I'm just saying, like, to go out in your first expedition and be like, "Holy crap, there he is." I mean, that's a good roll of dice.
It was. I drove. It's like a 12-hour drive, depending on how fast you drive, from where I am in central Illinois down there. And it was a 4-day expedition, I think, but I could only make 2 of them because between my teaching and at the time I was coaching a travel softball team for my daughters. I had to get back on a Sunday afternoon. So I was there on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but really Thursday night, Friday night, and then Saturday around noon, I had to take off to come home so I could be back on Sunday. It was very sad because the next night everybody talked about different things that they had seen and heard, and but that was a pretty active one too. There was a woman on this expedition who was a banker who they decided to put her out in the middle of the woods of this area in these private woods. And she had an account. This is a woman who is, and I write a lot about her, about Pam. She was not afraid of anything. She'd go out in the woods by herself. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to go out with her, she was defiant. Like, I don't need any guy or anybody else. I'm fine. And she was unflustered. She did not fluster. And I was probably about a quarter of a mile away when she started talking over the microphones, the walkie-talkies, about seeing something, and then seeing these big, large red eyes, and feeling things and vibrations in her body. And I raced there. I could run fairly well. I was the second one there to her, and she was just absolutely her heartbeat was off the charts. There was a medic there who checked on her. She was just completely flustered at what had happened there. And she says she had seen several creatures, and they measured between probably 8, 9, maybe even 10 feet tall. Just looking at her, angry that she was in her spot. The intention for this was to put someone in an area, particularly a woman, to bother somebody, then everybody else leave. And if Bigfoot does exist, they thought that they would react. And
like they wanted to use her as bait or something, like she'd come. Did they think that Bigfoot reacts differently towards women
and children? Yeah, there's a belief on that. But you read these stories about even Native Americans, and then down in Florida in particular, a couple of them areas down south, it seems like they're far more aggressive. But you read these stories, and it's like, don't go out in the woods alone, don't look behind, they don't want to be seen. There's stories about them going after children in particular. There's other stories that said they love children. There's others that say they react better to women. It's obviously, since we don't know whether this creature exists and we have no real research, it's not like a Jane Goodall who's absolutely observing the large apes and telling you what the characters. So there's all these different stories. Although ironically, Jane Goodall fully believes in Bigfoot.
Oh, I love that. Well, let's go back to Bigfoot in a second and talk a little bit more about what kind of you think that drives these people, because I know that's a big part of your book. I'm talking about their drive to find this creature, this Sasquatch, a Bigfoot. And let's talk about what you saw in Florida. So let's go into the Wayback Machine real quick and say that you said the most bizarre thing you'd ever seen or heard, or set that up for us for a second.
Sure. Well, Florida, anybody who's ever been in Florida, there's no place in this country like that. There's just absolutely not. I mean, when my wife was a biologist, and she would take care of alligators, and she was going through the snakes. There's all kinds of snakes. If you're in the woods in Florida and you don't see a snake, you're not looking. They're there, they're hiding. They may be up in a tree, which I know terrifies some people. Then they could drop down. Not that happens a lot. If you look well enough, and when you're down there, you'll see baby rattlers here, and you'll see something there. And this was an area where they used to do the annual rattlesnake roundup, where they put sticks in the wood, in the ground, and hit them so that snakes would come up for the ground. And they do it in another state now. And they collect the vems and what have you. So there's snakes everywhere. There's everything everywhere. I mean, that's one thing I certainly write about in the book, is all the things that could get you in Florida. It looked like a couple of days previous that these wild hogs that came here with the Spaniards in the 15 and 1600s, they wander around, and those hogs, man, with the tusk, you don't want to mess with them. You saw big areas that were just torn up, right? Literally, I mean, my little tent would be completely destroyed by any one of these things. And then, of course, you have the large alligators in certain areas, and just kind of crazy. So the first day we're out there, we're trekking through areas. So like my wife, I'm used to have gone out through my wife with this woman, Caroline Solomon, who unfortunately passed away a year ago. And she was all kinds of fiery and going through the woods. So we're going not off the paths. We're not walking in a regular path. I'm going, okay, I better really look right as I'm walking around. And so I had a good sense of what this area was like. I knew the green swamp in Florida. I knew that area. I've known these areas. It's thick. You can absolutely not walk through areas and easily. You're going underneath the bramble and over them, and there's swampy stuff and what have you.
And what part of Florida is this? Now, Florida's a big state, so what part of it is this?
Sure. It's about 2 hours, hour and a half, 2 hours north and slightly east of Tampa. Okay. It's in the middle of the state. If you look at the middle of the state, there's an area called the Green Swamp, which is a large area. This is on the northern part of the Green Swamp. We're probably about an hour. It's near Dade City. If you look up the Dade City, you'll get a sense of the area as well. Okay. This was such an out of the way place that this is where the Americans, we did in World War II, would take some of our worst German soldiers, because they knew that if they escaped, they're going to have a hard time getting through the swamps.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, with all the rattlesnakes. What have you. So anyway, I'd gone through all this area. Well, the second I was there for 2.5 days. and we're camping right on the edge of these woods, and there are waterways and all the other things going on there. So we come back late that night, excuse me, and Caroline says something about making a call. And I've heard them before, and I said, okay. So imagine the woods. It's really thick, really thick. And then there's a big area that clearly had been cut out for camping and picnicking and whatever, and that's where we are. It's probably an area that's no more than about 100 yards by about 50 yards, something like that. So we're at the very edge of the open, sandy area, and I'm sitting probably 3 to 6 feet away from the very edge of the woods that are in there. And so she makes a call late at night, and suddenly we start hearing something that's sort of a mixture between an owl and I can only guess an ape. It sounded like if you've ever seen the Planet of the Apes.
Yes.
The calls that they make. It sounded an awful lot like that. And you hear a little bit. Suddenly she makes a call, and way in the distance you hear something. And then it starts getting closer and closer. And it starts getting louder. And it's almost like it's coming from two different directions suddenly. And it's just going, and I'm sitting there dumbfounded. So anyway, you have that just screaming and yelling, and it's getting worse and worse. And it's just loud, and it's like Planet of the Apes loud, and it's just, and I'm sitting there with my hand on my recorder, and I didn't press the button. Oh. And I'm just looking in the woods going, am I going to see something come poking out? I mean, I was just, and being an idiot, instead of wanting to run in fear if something really was coming at me like that, I'm just sitting there going, wow, what's going on here? I was being this typical stupid journalist, the ones that run toward the hurricane instead of away from it.
Right.
And so we're all standing there, and then it just stops. It's almost like it's in front of me, and it just stops. And I thought, what can go through that kind of area that quickly, instead of your foot getting stuck in the muck and all the other things and jumping over things? And so I don't know. That was, Caroline turns to me and she just sort of smiled and said, now do you believe? And I'll tell you what, at about 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, it's very easy to believe when you've encountered something like that. Yeah. It was, and if you know something like that is out there, the fact that people like Caroline go out there time and time again, and Pam go out there time and time again, is really either amazingly brave or amazingly stupid, or both at the same time.
Well, you mentioned the Planet of the Apes, and that's a word we don't hear too much about the Sasquatch, but skunk ape is a word people use for that. And I know you talk about that a little bit. What's the origin of the word skunk ape?
Well, really what it is if in Florida, I don't know how much in Wisconsin that late at night or someplace you hear a skunk or gets run over by a car if you're near it, and it smells, horrid.
Yes.
That's the smell that is associated with the Bigfoot that lives in Florida. It's actually by and large, a leaner and smaller iteration of a Bigfoot, but it smells horribly. And so in Florida, the whole thing is that people who even slightly believe in Bigfoot, if they're out in the woods in the middle of the night and they smell something like that, they're like, uh-oh, is there a Bigfoot near me?
Nice.
And it's really funny because there's stories about him running alongside the roads in Orlando, where I lived for a while, around 520, which goes from Orlando out to Cape Canaveral. And there's big, of course, even though it's built up a lot, there's all kinds of swampy, middle of the nowhere type stuff, even along some state roads. Stories of Bigfoot running alongside cars and the smells, and there's a lot. Most people in Florida have been there for any time period, have heard of certainly the skunk ape. So that's where it really sort of came from.
Okay, that's pretty cool, and that's great that there's the regional stories of it. Because in Wisconsin, we have some, regional stuff. We even had the Bigfoot closer to where I grew up near Milwaukee, and people were talking about in the Kettle Moraine there that they see Bigfoot. And I had never heard about that growing up.
Well, I was going to say, regional. That was one of the things I wanted to write, is that in each of these chapters, I went to a different part of the country. And I wrote about the people, but I also wrote a great deal about the region, the stories from the region. Not just Bigfoot stuff, but paranormal stuff. Like in Southern Illinois, there's an awful lot of both UFO stories and activity, and also ghosts and what have you. So I was always, when I was in North Carolina, I was in the area where they had the first gold rush. I mean, it was literally right in that area, so we had to worry about falling down old shafts and what have you. But it's also an area that's known for its ghost stories. I mean, there's multiple books just written about that part of North Carolina and ghosts and what have you. And ghosts are another thing that just, I sort of dig those things as well. But when I was I also came up to northern Wisconsin.
Okay,
and,
so what city in Wisconsin? Oh, Phillips, Wisconsin. Okay.
Yeah, that's right on there. And there's a guy named Don Young. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Don Young is a guy who lived and grew up in that area, and he became a guide and was a guy that he felt as at home in the woods as he did at home. He'd fall asleep in the woods. He thought nothing of it. If you're laying down in the woods, he could probably tell you the difference between a squirrel and a chipmunk going through the grass and all kinds of different things. He lives in an area. I ended up coming up and spending some time with him, and he got so scared that he refused to go in the woods because he had a couple of encounters. He has a couple of cats that he believed that were eaten. His dog's back was broken. He's a guy that, if they had the zombie apocalypse, you want to be on his hip. He knows how to get through the woods and to live. So if someone like I thought, well, if someone like him lost his livelihood, people wouldn't go out in the woods. They thought he was crazy. So I was able to spend some time up there and talk about the history up in that area and talk about Don and his encounters. And in Florida, you were talking about the regional things. I was out in Virginia, and there's a belief, and I've talked to some people after this book had come out, who has worked with the federal government, and I've been told that there's a belief that there's a whole bunch of Bigfoot around where the CIA office is in Virginia, because of course the CIA is going to have its area, secluded because they don't want anybody to get in. Right. Sort of like if you ever go to Florida and if you go to Cape Canaveral, there's all kinds of wetlands. It's like if you can get through that stuff. I mean, I used to live right next to Cape Canaveral, and I knew a guy who was a security guard. You have large rattlers down in Florida. I mean, they're big and fat, thick, but they're even larger out there. And the hogs are everywhere. And the gators, I've seen gators, and my wife has too, that are like 13, 14 feet easily. There's all kinds of stuff. So it was sort of like that in Virginia too, where there's a guy told me a really interesting story that I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to share any of it, so I probably shouldn't tell too many details. But sure. That he saw, he absolutely never believed in Bigfoot until he had this story. And it was like, oh my God, he told me the story. And as a journalist, you try to have a pretty good, as Hemingway said, bullshit detector. Right. And this guy, I had no doubt that this guy was telling me either it was the truth or he believed it to be the truth. But this is a guy who's used to being out in woods. And there are other things he told me that made me think about it. So you have that. You have in Ohio, which is Salt Fork State Park, is, some people would even, I sort of joke that it's sort of like the Disneyland for Bigfoot, because it seems like it has more sightings per visit than any other place I've ever seen. Interesting. I've also been fortunate enough to spend some time with Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who's he's a professor at Idaho State University, and he's probably on every Bigfoot show you can imagine. Mm-hmm. He's he talks about locomotion. He can look at footprints and tell what's going on there. But I spent some time up in the Wind River Mountains, which is primarily an area owned nowadays by the Native Americans, which was their original area. And he had a guy with him named John Mazinski, who is the big sheep expert in the country, and was on the first grizzly bear expedition and put himself in peril and almost. I'm surprised he didn't get eaten by a grizzly back in the 70s. There's all kinds of stories about Yellowstone, which I've spent some time visiting at. They're all over the place. As a matter of fact, some of the people there, if you get them to talk, they'll tell you stories of things that they've sighted out there. So every area has these sightings. The same way, if there's ghost stories everywhere, there's Bigfoot stories everywhere too, and they go back thousands of years.
But when we're talking about Bigfoot, and you talk about ghosts. Now, a ghost to me, obviously, it's something we can't prove, and it's spectral, or doesn't exist on this plane, or doesn't have a physical presence, or there's so many things. Now, Bigfoot, though, from the people you've interviewed, obviously, and you've been out on these adventures, you've gone to all these different regions, seen the fact that it's not just like one location. It's not the Pacific Northwest. It's not just the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and like that Phillips area and stuff. It's not just the Skunk Ape in Florida. You know, it's all over the country, but they have these legends of Bigfoot and people that have claimed to have seen it. Do you see Bigfoot as, or at least the people who have made the encounters, have had the encounters, do you see him as a physical entity or a supernatural entity?
Well, I have no reason to believe it wouldn't be just a natural entity. There are certainly stories, and again, I didn't mean to. I apologize. I didn't mean to make it. I don't believe ghosts and Bigfoot are the same. I completely agree with you on this.
Sure.
They're two different things. One's spectral, as you said, and one is flesh and blood, if it exists.
Well, no, I mean, because there are people that say that Bigfoot's a ghost. Like, there's a million theories about it. So I was saying, you know, of all the experiences you've collected and the people you've interviewed, are you leaning more towards the Bigfoot as, you know, flesh and blood, physical, just like us, or something a little, more spectral? So that was kind of what I was getting at.
Well, let me throw something out that actually I did not write in the book because I just talked to somebody, as I mentioned, who has worked with the federal government and in security or whatever you want to call it. And he brought up a point. He was talking about multi-dimensions, that we live in a three-dimensional world. There's a belief among science that there may be multiple dimensions out there. And he ended up talking to somebody who said, you know, there may be as many, and this guy threw a number, I forget if it was 14 or 16. He goes, well, let's say there's 14. And the way the guy said it, he felt like this guy sort of knew some things. Okay. So I guess let me throw out this bizarre option here. I think one option is certainly that Bigfoot is a flesh and blood animal that just has not been captured. That obviously would have to have significant intelligence to elude us for such an extended period. Although not that much intelligence because we're not that really good in the woods.
Right. But if that's like the cryptozoology,
right.
way, just to be like, Bigfoot's just an undiscovered species.
Right. And this person, I've heard from other people too, say that the federal government claims that they do know that Bigfoot exists. I've talked to multiple people who said federal officials have told them that. Someone has even talked to the federal government about what to look for if you're Bigfoot. There's been all stories about that have actually been chronicled. You could probably find.
Oh man, I got to go invade the DNR. It's just in Madison and be like, I want the truth.
Right. Well, they won't tell you. You have to find some people off the record, probably. But there are also other people that think that's crazy. Like when I called a Wisconsin official when I was coming up there, and I said, "Hey, so you guys ever see Bigfoot?" I know this may sound crazy, but everything he goes, "No, I'm not." He sort of dismissed it,
right,
out of hand. So the one would be the flesh and blood. The other would be there's several stories believing that they may have been here from aliens, or that and they have been deposited here to look after us. And again, I don't subscribe to this in any way. That's another story I've heard. Another one is perhaps that they are psychic and they can read your minds and thoughts, and therefore they can elude you that way. And another way is that perhaps they can go maybe interdimensionally, because there's so many stories of people feeling like they have them cornered. But I think the counter to that is this: if they're so elusive, if they exist and they're so elusive, they can go through all these different things. How come we keep stumbling upon them? If we are in fact stumbling upon them. So I guess that's the counter to that as well. And you were asking me about the people who search. Mm-hmm. By and large, you have people. I've sort of tried. I think I've categorized them myself into about three different areas. One is people who have seen Bigfoot or believe they have seen Bigfoot, and that is driving them because they want to see it again, or they want to confirm that they actually did see something and that they were not crazy, or they just wanted to have some confirmation of it. I think there are the other people who are just scientifically curious and want an adventure, perhaps even sort of like myself. You have the rare scientist who's out there, like a Jeff Meldrum and a John Mazinski, who actually have some, creds to go out there and do that. And I have found also, I think there's people who go out in the Bigfoot community the same way you sign up for a softball team or something like that. They're just lonely and they're trying to make connections with people. And this is a way for them to reach out to other people. Those are some of the types of people that I've noticed. And certainly there's people that go in the cracks and different than that as well. But those are the main types of people I have noticed searching for Bigfoot.
And have you found it, I mean, even between the groups, even from scientists to experiencers to people who just are looking for, to do something on a Friday night, when you've gone through that and met those people in your journalistic observations, you think you found any kind of through line between all the groups that kind of contributes to that obsession?
A reason for the obsession?
Yeah.
I think, I don't think I have any. I think a lot of the things that I wrote about, I stuck to the facts as much as I could. But if I were reporting on whether or not Bigfoot existed, what have you, there's the scientific evidence just isn't there yet. There's a lot of anecdotal. There's a lot of bright people out there who are looking for it, and I'm not dismissing that this evidence someday will go, oh, of course that was evidence. There's some real bright people. One person who I admire actually a great deal. I've gotten to know him, and I consider him a friend. Not that we hang out all the time, but when we do talk, is Cliff Barrickman from Finding Bigfoot. He really has a great approach to it, and he's always talking about these elements and what is evidence and what isn't, and he understands what is not actually true evidence. He clearly does. I mean, I think he used to teach science in middle school or elementary school as well before he went on to the show as a teacher. So I don't know that I have found anything that you're asking for right there. But there's a lot of really interesting things out there that all it takes is one thing where suddenly all the pieces fall into place.
Have you encountered people you think that, when we think of obsession, I mean, the first thing I think of is Captain Ahab and Moby Dick. And the idea that you're hunting something and you do it to the detriment of everything else.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of people, yeah.
We talk about these kind of, first of all, it's an obsession where you're really into something, and that can be off-putting, to a lot of people. But also, you're really into something that's outside of the mainstream, and that maybe some people, don't approve of. And did you find anybody having a particular kind of a good way of coping with that? I mean, were most people that you worked with pretty well adjusted?
I do think so. A lot of people think there's a bunch of crazy people running through the woods with pitchforks and knives and fleers and what have you. And there are some. There absolutely are.
Watch out for those.
Which certainly made writing this book very interesting. But I think the people who were grounded were equally interesting. Everybody has a different story. I mean, as a journalist, one thing I try to convey, as I mentioned to students and myself, is that you can find a story anywhere. It could be where I remember one time I was getting gifts for my daughter's birthday party at a state park when I lived in Florida, and this grandmother was telling me her story about not having seen her grandmother. And, I just sat there and listened. I like to listen and hear people's stories. So there are also a lot of people who are very grounded in there. But obviously there's something that's driving them to get through there, and each person has a really different story. And that's what I loved about doing this, and I enjoyed, is that you have all these the struggles these people have. I mean, I know one guy whose house is sort of in disrepair, and he spends all his money on technology. I mean, there's people like that. I've met some people who I think are looking at the world the right way, and are sort of can't help themselves to do that. There are others. There's an awful lot of people I've come across too who get so excited and throw themselves into this, and then they get bothered. They have nothing else that they just suddenly disbelieve.
Sure, they get disillusioned with the whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. They completely do. And I'm trying to think of all the people. There's so many people I wrote about and talked about in the book here that I just love their stories, and also that they shared them with me. Well,
for the people that want to follow up and they want to pick up a copy of the book, where's the best place that they can order a copy of Monster Trek for themselves?
It's Monster Trek: The Obsessive Search for Bigfoot. My last name is Gisondi, Joe Gisondi. It's published by University of Nebraska Press. But you can order it off their website, or probably for most people, it's just easier to go to Amazon.com and order it. That'd probably be the best place to go get the book there.
Okay, and we're going to have a link to that in our show notes, and you're going to be able to find that at othersidepodcast.com/126. Now, has this inspired you in your journalistic and writing quest? Are you gonna pick UFOs next, or what's next for you?
I don't know. Well, what's next for me is I've got a couple of things. Actually, I have a sports journalism book. I teach a lot of sports media. I run a national sports conference for college students, and I have a second edition of my sports journalism book that's going to be coming out later this winter. It has people from all over the country talking about it. It's where it's used in classrooms for people to learn how to learn sports journalism, but I don't think most of the people listening here, well, maybe not. I had one guy who's really into wrestling.
Well, and to tell you the truth, like it's one obsession or the other. Like people can.
Sport is definitely an obsession.
And there's plenty of Bigfoot hunters in Wisconsin that love the Green Bay Packers too. So there's
there you go. There you go. And I also have I just found an illustrator. I believe we have an illustrator for a book, and he and I are partnering on a book. A children's book. I've written it, and he's illustrating it. Actually, it's about monsters. So maybe I'll come by at some other point.
That'd be fantastic.
And then I'm working on a fiction book. That's a historical fiction book. There, I would very much like to go out and. I need to find an angle. Like for the Bigfoot book, my angle was a lot of people have written about Bigfoot, but no one had written about the people who search for Bigfoot and experiences going through and talking to them. And that was my biggest thing, even though I did talk about stories and experiences and other paranormal things that are connected to it. I'd have to find something that's connected because I love all these other things. I just can't get enough of it. Especially when I talk to people like you, I get to relive these. I'm going, yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, going out in those hunts and stuff like that, I'm jealous just talking about not being outside today, but like summertime in Oklahoma or Arkansas sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, Florida in August is not fun, nor is Wisconsin in January.
Right. So
the funny thing is, of course, Bigfoot's in every state reported except Hawaii. But who the heck doesn't want to be in Hawaii?
Right, the one place we should go hunting for Bigfoot any time of year.
Yeah,
is the one place we haven't seen him.
You and I will head out there.
That sounds good. All right, Joe, thank you very much for joining us today. Guys, if you want to find information on how to order Joe's book, we're going to have that right at the show notes at othersidepodcast.com/126. And of course, if there's any more information or you get any other books, we'll let you know on the podcast. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you so much for your time.
You know what my favorite part of that interview was, Wendy?
What?
It was when he said he was talking to that person who'd worked with the CIA. And that guy just made it sound like he knows that Bigfoot exists. He's like, I probably can't give away too many details of the actual conversation, but when we were having this, and he said he was talking to the people who work for something like the federal, the wildlife division and everything, and they have Bigfoot procedures.
That's so cool.
So, I mean,
awesome.
Just the fact that those things exist, that always makes me think when somebody who knows more than we do is just like, oh yeah, Bigfoot's there. Like you're always
gives
like,
you hope.
Yeah, what is he? Either that or there's some kind of disinformation on Bigfoot.
Sure.
That it's like he wants us to believe that Bigfoot exists because it's going to make the government, it's going to make it easier for them to control our minds.
Yeah, like trying to throw us way off the track.
Right. Like what's really happening is that they're doing some kind of experiment in the wood. Wendy, have you finished Stranger Things yet?
Yes.
Okay. That was another. First of all, if you guys listen to this podcast and you haven't finished watching Stranger Things yet, it's okay. You've already heard the interview. It's okay to pause now, go finish watching it, and come back later. But the thing about Stranger Things, when he talked about and this is spoilers, so this is where you would stop.
Yeah, you could skip like a couple minutes forward.
Yeah, when he talks about Bigfoot as an interdimensional being.
Oh, sure, right.
That made me think about Stranger Things. That you could like Bigfoot slipping in and out of the upside down.
Cool. I love that when people bring up that theory.
Yeah, and I think there's not that there's something to any of this. Like I don't know, but just if we'd find like Bigfoot skeletons, you figure, or you'd find more like Bigfoot poops all over the place. Right?
Sure.
Because they're huge. And so right, we find 65 million year old dinosaur feces. You figure you'd find some kind of like in the cave where Bigfoot lived and like some hermit Bigfoot dies.
He's very polite. He covers up his pit toilet.
He hides it. Yeah, maybe Bigfoot has a pit toilet. I never even thought about that. But so the idea that they slip in back and forth between dimensions or somewhere else, or that there's just something that they walk through a portal and that's where they are, and that's why you see them, and that's why you can't find any bones or anything.
And their bathroom is on the other side of the portal.
Right.
That's why.
That's where the little Bigfoot's room is. And And so there was a couple of interesting theories. I like the fact that Joe's not judgmental about anything. I like the fact that he keeps an open mind, and in the end, he doesn't even have a opinion. He's not like, oh, Bigfoot's totally real or Bigfoot's totally fake.
He's a reporter.
Yeah.
Reporting what he sees and what he's experienced.
And probably we're not going to know that Bigfoot's real until Bigfoot shows up and has a press conference. Maybe at the Harry and the Hendersons 2 premiere, we'll finally get that Bigfoot disclosure we've been dreaming about. But it was funny, we had the conversation. We bring in the CIA, we bring in the Department of Natural Resources, we bring in the government. The idea that there could be Bigfoot disclosure as well as UFO disclosure, I never even thought about that.
Amazing.
That, oh my God, the government's keeping it from us. It just made me laugh to think about that. All right. So, the obsessive search for Bigfoot today, and the people who are obsessed with it, like Joe talks about a guy that, he spends all of his money on, like that every dollar, like his house might be falling apart, but he'll spend it on Bigfoot hunting equipment. It's that distraction, that obsession that I think, we've been thinking about a place to put this particular song in a podcast for a while now, and so we thought this one would be perfect. Wendy, what song is it?
It is the Heidegger Paradox.
Okay, and this is one we always have to explain anyway.
Yes.
Just in case you haven't had Philosophy 101, Martin Heidegger, Heidegger, was a philosopher who basically said that we're dealing with existential dread. Existential dread is the fact that what's the meaning of life? We're going to die. And it's the knowing, we're going to die. So what's the meaning? What's the point? We distract ourselves with some kind of obsession, whether it be sports or whether it be Bigfoot or whether it be partying and music, which is what this song is about. We distract ourselves from that knowledge that we're going to die. And it's in finding that distraction is how we learn how to live. And that's the paradox, because it takes knowing that we're going to die in order to live our lives to the fullest.
Indeed.
Man. So,
well, let's hear the song.
Yeah, so that's why this particular song we thought would be perfect in people's obsession with finding Bigfoot. Here is Sunspot and the Heidegger Paradox.
Comes and Tuesday goes, dishes suck and laundry blows. I'd love to tell my boss to kiss my ass. Well, Wednesday's here and then it's gone. My best friend's passed out on the lawn on Thursday. First Thursday. So, raise your glass to Friday, when I can be all I can be. I'm dying to party, and I want a life that's about me. We only get one shot. Some days I don't even wanna try. Tonight's our night to rock. Life sucks, let's live before we die. My mama slaps me in my face. My girlfriend puts me in my place. Why didn't anyone say it'd be this tough? My minivan is in the shop because I backed into a cop. A flat broke bone sitting on my dub. So, raise your glass to Friday, when I can be all I can be. I'm dying to party, and I want a life that's about me. We only get one shot. Some days I don't even wanna try. Tonight's our night to rock. Life sucks, let's live before we die. Times I've hurt my pride, I just can't stop this wicked side of me. Cause Mr. Hyde, that bastard, wants me back. And I'll get too inebriated, wake up again humiliated. I'm just trying to have some fun, got me some slack. So, raise your glass to
for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.
Holy crap, don't forget our patrons.
What? I never forget them, Mike. I think about them every single day, and I'm not exaggerating.
I'm thinking about them right now. And so when we think about our patrons, we think about how they're the coolest people we know. And number one, we want to thank our man Ned. Ned, Bigfoot, thanks to you.
Woo! We're going to see Ned at the release party this weekend.
Hell yeah, we are. And to all our other Patreons, a big feat.
Yes.
We're clapping our big feet in a round of applause for you. Yeah, stomping our big feet for you. Anyway, if you're interested in becoming a Patreon community, in checking out the little factoid videos that we were talking about, our Instagram posts, we got blog posts and show notes and episodes and songs that come out every single week for your listening pleasure. If you're interested in supporting that, oh, I forgot the website. Wendy, where can they find it?
It's so easy, Mike. It's right at OthersidePodcast.com/donate.
Oh, that is way too easy. We'll see you there, guys.
Give me your best Bigfoot roar. I'll try doing mine.
Uh-oh. Is there a Bigfoot near me?